succeeded William Wordsworth in becoming the poet laureate during Queen Victoria's reign in 1850. Ring out the old, ring in the new, ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. So once the time passes, the year passes out, it is like you have to let it go and allow the new year to get in. Courageous and liberated individuals marked by generosity and kindness. Hello everyone, welcome back to my yet another session 1 of First Sem BCom English. Myself, B. Shobharani, faculty in English from Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence in MYSURU. In today's session, I'll be discussing about a very interesting poem, Unit 1, Poem 3 of First Sem BCom English syllabus called Ring Out Wild Bells. So the name of the poem, that is the third poem in the syllabus, that is Ring Out Wild Bells by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Moving on to the next slide, what am I going to discuss in the coming slides? I'll be discussing about a brief introduction about the poet, that is Alfred Lord Tennyson, then about the poem. Actually, what does the poet wants to convey through this poem, Ring Out Wild Bells, and annotation of the poem, that is line by line, I'll be explaining about the poem. And at the end, we have the conclusion or the summary of the poem. Let me move on to introduce this very interesting poet of the poem called Ring Out Wild Bells. The name of the poem itself will tell, Ring Out Wild Bells. So here about the poet, Alfred Lord Tennyson from the year 1809 to 1892 is considered to be the best of the Victorian poets. So he is one of the best poets of the Victorian era. He succeeded William Wordsworth in becoming the poet laureate during Queen Victoria's reign in 1850. See, he succeeded yet another famous poet by name William Wordsworth in becoming the poet laureate during the Queen Victoria's reign in 1850. He was influenced by a romantic poetry, especially by John Keats. You know, John Keats is known for his romantic poem, so he was influenced by John Keats. His father, a rector, a person who was in charge of a church, managed to give him a wide literary education. So he had an influence of his father also, who gave him the wide literary education. He had a lifelong fear of mental illness owing to his family history. His health condition was not that good, as he had a lifelong fear of mental illness which was carried from his family. It was a family history, and he wrote an epic poem of 6,000 lines when he was just 12 years old. Imagine such a great poet is. At the age of 12 itself, he has written 6,000 lines of an epic poem. He used poetry as a way of taking his mind from his troubles. As I mentioned, he had a lifelong fear of mental illness, which he carried it from his family history, but yet he did not mind for it, but he wanted to move away from that illness. So how did he keep away from this mental illness? He used to write poems, or he used poetry as a way of taking his mind from his trouble. So whatever troubles a person might have, but if you are involved in some other thing, definitely you will overcome all those troubles. Then his study in Trinity College, Cambridge, made him close to a brilliant man called Arthur Henry Hallam. So this person is a very, very important person in this poem. So when he was studying in Trinity College at Cambridge, he came across a close friend by name Arthur Henry Hallam. The friendship shared with Hallam was one of the most intense emotional experiences for Tennyson. This friend by name Arthur Henry Hallam had a great influence on the mind of Tennyson. The friendship shared with Hallam was one of the most intense emotional experiences for Tennyson. The death of Hallam affected him profoundly because, the death of his close friend by name Arthur Henry Hallam affected him greatly. His well-known poem is a narrative poem in 12 parts called The Idylls of the King. The passing of Arthur. So when he lost his friend, he wrote a book called The Passing of Arthur, Tithonus, Ulysses, In Memoriam, Claribel, and Mariana are some of his most celebrated poems. Ring Out Wild Bells is one of the poems in the anthology In Memoriam of AHH, that is Arthur Henry Hallam, in 1833. The poem, composed in 1850, is an elegy to his friend. A person who dies to give a mark of respect is an elegy to his friend and his sister's fiancé, that is Arthur Henry Hallam. Arthur Henry Hallam was not only a close friend of Tennyson, he was also his sister's fiancé. So it forms one part of the full dirge, a song sung for a dead person. In the English custom, ringing of the bell on New Year's Eve signifies ringing out the old year and ringing in the new year. All of us know when there is an arrival of the new year, we all celebrate it with so full of happiness and joy, thinking that we need to get rid of all the old things, whatever troubles or whatever happenings that happened in the past year, we have to forget that and move on with a new positive mind in the new year. So it forms one part of the full dirge. In the English custom, ringing of the bell on New Year's Eve signifies ringing out the old year and ringing in the new year. The poem envisages hope and optimism and consciously resisting the tendencies for negativity and moroseness, unhappiness. The theme of the poem is the conflict between hope and bleakness, with the poet choosing and ushering in only hopes. So this poem itself will tell that we should always welcome the new year with full of positivity and with hope and forget the happenings that happened in the past year. Ring out stands for bidding adieu to the old year. So whenever we say, the very word itself I told you, ring out means we have to say goodbye to all the things that happened in the past year. So ring out stands for bidding adieu, saying goodbye out to the old year, and ring in means what? We are welcoming the new year. So whatever has happened in the past is past. Now we are moving on into a new year with full of happiness, joy, and good happenings to happen in the coming new year. The new year. Both these phrases are repeated in the symmetrical stanzas of 4 lines each. So this is a poem where the whole of the poem is divided into stanzas, where each stanza contains 4 lines each. So this whole poem has 8 stanzas with 4 lines each. The metaphor of ringing of the wild bells connotes to embrace hopes, means signifies what? Connotes embrace hope. So ringing bell is something like it is inviting the hope and changes and future by discarding the things that hold us back. Never think of the past, whatever has happened, and go on cribbing with the same thing what has happened in the past, even in the coming year. So we have to forget all the things that has happened. It might be good or bad, whatever it is, forget the past and move on in the new year with a new mindset, with a new hope, and with new positiveness. The speaker calls out to ring out the grief that bogs down the mind. So whatever we have come across in the mind, like whatever sorrow or whatever we have come across, the speaker calls out to ring out, remove it. Then the hierarchies between the rich and the poor, never think of that. The hierarchies, what we come across, the rich, the poor, all that disparity we have to get rid of. The dying year, the year is just passing, party strife, faithless coldness of times, lust for gold, wars, slander, and spite. He urges to ring in better ways of life, sweet manners, pure laws, peace, love, and kindness. What exactly the poet wants to say in this poem? The poem reflects Tennyson's personal philosophy and vision that the human race can progress only by letting go of the dogmas of the past. So whatever we have come across in the past, we have to let it go and welcome the new year. Every stanza loudly declares the destructive practices that human society should expunge to adopt better ways of living. So we need to, that is, every stanza tells what? Loudly declares the destructive practices that human society has indulged, and we should overcome all that, and we have to change the way of living. Moving on to the poem, that is the poem written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. As I said, this is an 8 stanza poem with each stanza having 4 lines. You can make out here. I'll read out the poem for you all first and then annotate the stanzas. Ring out wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out wild bells and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new. Ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind. For those that here we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor, the disparity of rich and poor. For those, ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life with sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring in the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land. Ring in the Christ that is to be. So, this is what the poem goes. Moving on to a brief introduction of this poem, Ring Out Wild Bells by Alfred Lord Tennyson. What exactly the poet wants to convey in this poem called Ring Out Wild Bells. As I said, ring out means whatever has happened in the past, we have to forget, we have to just get rid of it, moving into the new year with a positive mind, with happiness and with joy. So what exactly the poet wants to convey in this poem? Let me have a brief introduction of this poem. Ring Out Wild Bells is a part of Alfred Lord Tennyson's larger work, In Memoriam AHH. As I said, AHH Arthur Henry Hallam, who was a very close friend of Tennyson and also a sister's fiancé, which was written in memory of his close friend Arthur Henry Hallam. So I said In Memoriam AHH, which was written in memory of his close friend Arthur Henry Hallam, whom he had lost, and the loss of his friend had affected him profoundly. This particular section is often seen as a New Year's poem. So, the very word itself I told you all, ring out wild bells. So, this particular section is often seen as a New Year's poem calling for the renewal of society and personal transformation. See, whenever we move into a new year, we have to change ourselves. So, every year is like a lesson for us where we need to get rid of all the things what we have done in the past and move on with a new mindset. So we have to have that personal transformation. So this particular section is often seen as a New Year's poem calling for the renewal of society. Renewal of society means we have to renew our minds. We need to move into a new mindset and personal transformation. He tries to use the metaphor, comparison of ringing bells to symbolize the passing of the old year. So ring out means what? Passing of the old year. Ring in means entry of the new year and welcoming of the new year. Old year and the welcoming of the new, emphasizing themes of renewal, hope and social change. See, ring out means symbolizing the passing of the old year. Ring in means the welcoming of the new, emphasizing themes of renewal, hope and social change. Let me move on to the annotation of the first stanza of the poem called Ring Out Wild Bells by Alfred Lord Tennyson. As I said, this is a poem with 8 stanzas where each stanza is having 4 lines each. So, stanza 1. Ring out wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out wild bells and let him die. So let me annotate or analyze the lines of stanza 1. The poem opens with a vivid and dynamic scene urging the bells to ring out against a wild sky filled with flying clouds and frosty light. See, the poem opens with what? Ring out wild bells to the wild sky. The poem opens with a vivid and dynamic scene urging the bells to ring out against a wild sky filled with flying clouds and frosty light. So when the new year arrives, when the old year is passing, we feel that something new is going to come ahead of us. So urging the bells to ring out against a wild sky filled with flying clouds and frosty light. The imagery evokes a sense of the dramatic passing of time. So you can imagine, like, the ringing of the bell itself is an indication, or it shows that we need to forget that the old year is passing out, passing of time, marking the end of the year. So every new year will set on with the passing of the old year. The poet personifies the year as something that is dying in the night. When we say that the old year is passing, so the poet personifies the year as something that is dying in the night. So now the year is passing and calls for the bells to help usher it out, emphasizing a desire to leave the past behind. See how nice these lines are. The flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Dying in the night means it is passing. Ring out wild bells and let him die. Let the old year go. You cannot hold it. You cannot hold time. Time that is lost forever. So once the time passes, the year passes out, it is like you have to let it go and allow the new year to get in. Moving on to the explanation of stanza 2. Ring out the old, ring in the new. Ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. See how beautiful these lines are. Ring out the old. Old means whatever has happened in the past, old year, ring out, just remove. Ring in the new. Allow the new year to come out, the new hopes, the new, what you can call the social change that has to happen in the new year. Welcome all that. Ring happy bells. So in this stanza, the poet continues the theme of transition, change. Whatever it is, you might be good, or you might have had some changes of your behavior, whatever it is in the past. Yes, of course. But still, again, there are some more changes that you need to make in the coming new year. So transition is a change, calling for the old year to be replaced by the new. See, ring out the old, ring in the new. In the stanza, the poet continues the theme of transition, change, calling for the old year to be replaced by the new. We all know that the bells symbolize what? Symbolize happiness. The sound what the bells make itself will make us happy. So here, ring out the old, ring in the new. The bells are described as happy. So as I said, bells are something which symbolize happiness, suggesting a celebratory tone. Whenever we ring a bell, like we are in a celebratory mode. We are in a mood of celebrating the happy happenings despite the coldness of the snow. So whatever has happened in the past is coldness of the snow means something might have happened, might good or bad, but allow all that to pass away and welcome the new year with happiness. This stanza also introduces a moral dimension, urging the bells to ring out falsehood and bring in truth. Indicate means whatever falsehood has happened, just allow it to go. But welcome what? Bring in what? Truth. Indicating a desire for personal and societal integrity in the coming year. So whatever things might have happened in the past, I think the whole year, so many things would have happened. We would have come across so many happenings, so many events, which some might be good, some might be bad. Whatever it is, you allow everything to go away and welcome the new year. So ring in new bell. See, ring out the grief that saps the mind. Something would have happened. Somebody would have lost somebody in the family. At that point of time, we feel so sad for us, and that will be just causing us grief or sorrow, and we'll have that in the mind. So ring out the grief that saps the mind. For those that here we see no more. So that's what I said. Like, for example, here in this poem, Alfred Lord Tennyson was so profoundly affected by the demise of his friend Arthur Henry Hallam. So, but still, what he wants to say is, ring out the grief that saps the mind. For those that here we see no more. Though we don't find them again, they have passed away and we don't find them anymore, yet Wring out the feud of the rich and the poor, the disparity between the rich. So you try to overcome that disparity, that they are rich, they are poor, and ring in redress to all mankind. So try to welcome everything, have humanity, have goodness, be happy, all that what he wants to say. Ring out the grief that saps the mind. For those that here we see no more, ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. So what exactly the poet wants to say in these 4 lines of stanza 3? Here, Tennyson addresses the emotional burden of the past year. Something would have happened in the last year and you'll have that burden in your heart. You'll have that heaviness for all the happenings that has happened in the past. So, here Tennyson addresses the emotional burdens of the past year, calling for the bells to dispel grief. So, when you ring bell, all that grief, dispel means remove, or remove all that has happened in the past will be removed. Mourning for those who have passed away, feeling sorry for those who have passed away. Additionally, the poet calls for an end to social divisions and economic disparities. That's what he said. Ring out the feud of rich and poor. That means, additionally, the poet calls for an end to social division. He is rich, he is poor. I am having so much of money, I have so much of gold. All that disparity, you have to remove it. So, additionally, the poet calls for an end to social divisions. Even religion also should not come into picture here. So, everybody is one. Everybody is one. All are equal. And economic disparities, that is, he is rich, he is poor. Advocating for justice and fairness. Everywhere you have to find justice and fairness in the things they do. The call for redress to all mankind. So, what exactly he wants to say with this line? Ring in redress to all mankind. The call for redress to all mankind reflects what? An utopian vision where the societal wrongs are corrected. There are mistakes done by people, but we have to correct them. So, ring in redress to all man, correct them and bring them on to the right track so that there will be truth, there will be fairness in everything what they do is what the poet means in this stanza 3, that is, ring out the grief that saps the mind. For those that here we see no more, ring out the feud of rich and poor, ring in redress to all mankind. Moving on to stanza 4. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife, ring in the nobler modes of life with sweeter manners, poorer laws. So what does exactly this stanza 4 in the poem Ring Out Wild Bells convey? The stanza focuses on political and social reform. See, ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party fights, quarrels, ring in the nobler modes of life with sweeter manners, poorer laws. So this stanza focuses on more on political and social reform. Social reform is social changes, political changes and social changes. Tennyson calls for the end of outdated causes and political conflicts that no longer serve the society. Whenever there is a political conflict, in no manner it is going to serve the human society. So you just put an end for all these outdated causes, political conflicts, which will in no way help the society. In their place, so instead of political conflicts, what are you supposed to bring in? That is, in their place, he wishes for the advent of more noble way of living, characterized by better behavior and just laws. So, in place of all those political conflicts and all those outdated causes, what he wants bring in for the new year, in their place, he wishes for the advent of, for the implementation of more noble way of living, characterized by better behavior and just laws. So, this whole stanza 4 of this poem called Ring Out Wild Bells reflects an earning. Earning means a want for progress and improvement in human conduct and governance. So even in the governance also, he wants to find improvement in the coming year. So whatever has happened past, outdated causes, political conflicts, everything should go away and welcome in what? Progress, improvement in human conduct and governance, management, everything. All that he urges for all these things to happen in the coming new year. Stanza 5. What are the lines of stanza 5 of this poem? Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. What exactly the poet wants to convey with these 4 lines of stanza 5? Tennyson continues his call for renewal by urging the bells to eliminate wants. See, human beings, the human needs are like countless. So it goes on and on. So Tennyson wants to say that, continues his call for renewal of urging the bells. The bells, when you ring a bell, it has to eliminate what? Wants. Then what? Worry and sin. So all this has to be eliminated. So when you ring a bell, it's an indication or it's a signal for the elimination of want, worry and sin. That is what? Ring out the want, the care, the sin. He criticizes the faithless coldness. See here, the faithless coldness of the times. So what does he say? He criticizes the faithless coldness of contemporary singer, musician, society, suggesting a lack of empathy and warmth. So the faithless coldness of times. So what he's criticizing, what? The faithless coldness means of contemporary singer, musician, society, suggesting a lack of what? Empathy and warmth. Interestingly, he also asked for his own, see here, mournful rhymes. Ring out my mournful rhymes. So interestingly, he also asked for his own mournful rhymes to be wrung out. Wrung out means to remove out, indicating a desire to move past his personal grief and sorrow. So whatever grief, sorrow we have, personal things we have come across in the past year, it has to go away. It has to pass away. And to welcome what? To welcome what? A more joyful and hopeful expression. Always hope. We should always have a good hope that something good is going to happen. Then only we can move on and on with a positive mind. So always have a positive mind and have a positive hope. Moving on to the stanza 6. So what does this stanza 6 lines convey? Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. So this stanza addresses societal vices such as false pride. There are people who just try to impress others with a false pride. So societal vices such as false pride based on social status or lineage, as well as slander and malice. Tennyson calls for these negative traits to be expelled. All these are negative traits. What are slander, malice, all this false pride, all these are negative traits which needs to be removed, and for a new era, new period characterized by love of truth. So what has to come in? What has to ring out? All these false thing, all false pride, all these negative traits has to be expelled or removed. And what has to be welcomed? A love of truth, righteousness, and a shared sense of goodness to be welcomed. Moving on to the stanza 7. Ring out old shapes of foul diseases. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. See how nicely these lines go in this stanza 7 of the poem called Ring Out Wild Bells. So in this, you can call this as a powerful stanza. Why? Because Tennyson calls for the eradication of diseases. So like for example, we had come across in 2020 the coronavirus, and the amount of agony we came across at that point of time, where many people died. Many family members lost their loved ones, kith and kin, all that happened. So we have to forget the past. So 2020 is past. Now we are in a new year. So in this powerful stanza, Tennyson calls for the eradication of diseases. So he tells, ring out means the removal, that is eradication of diseases, and the end of greed. Yes, man's greed has to come to an end. Man's greed is nothing but endless. So our wants are something which is endless. So we want, in order to fulfill our human wants, we start doing so many other things. Just he wants to convey through these lines of his poem called Ring Out Wild Bells. In this powerful stanza, Tennyson calls for the eradication of diseases and the end of greed. He also wishes, see here, ring out the narrowing lust of gold, means it's a greed, wants. Remove the wants, try to overcome all those wants and greeds. He also wishes for an end to the numerous wars that have plagued humanity throughout the history. From the history, we have come across so many wars taking place. So he says he also wishes for the end of all these wars that have been taking place from time memorial. And instead, he envisions a future of lasting peace. As we know, whenever there is an outbreak of a war, definitely there is no peace and harmony in the human beings, in the society. So, among the people. So, what he wants to say is, he wishes for an end to the numerous wars that have plagued humanity throughout the history, and instead he envisions or wishes a future of lasting peace. Peace and harmony has to be set among the people. This utopian vision is a significant part of Tennyson's hopeful message for the new year. So whenever we greet somebody for a new year, we try to wish them something good. So that is what this utopian vision is, a significant part of Tennyson's hopeful message for the new year. Moving on to the last but one, stanza 8 of this poem called Ring Out Wild Bells. So what are the lines of this stanza 8 of this poem, which are the last 4 lines of this poem? Ring in the valiant man, very strong, valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land, ring in the Christ that is to be. So this final stanza of the poem called Ring Out Wild Bell is a call for the emergence of courageous, ring in the valiant, valiant means courageous, valiant man. The final stanza is a call for the emergence of courageous and liberated individuals marked by generosity and kindness. Here, the larger heart means more generous. Whenever we say, oh, you have a big heart, means whoever is very generous, we try to relate them telling that they have a larger heart. So, courageous and liberated individuals marked by generosity and kindness. Tennyson envisions the end of societal darkness. Here, ring out the darkness of the land. Tennyson envisions or wishes the end of societal darkness. Darkness here literally means all the bad things that is happening in the society, and the coming of a new era of enlightenment and moral purity symbolized by the Christ that is to be. So this messianic means something which is conveyed good. Messianic means a good message. Reference underscores the Christ that is to be is nothing but a messianic reference, underscores the poet's hope for a transformative and redemptive future. The stanza 8 of this poem is so very nice, where you can come out. The final stanza is a call for the emergence of courageous and liberated individuals marked by generosity and kindness. Tennyson envisions the end of societal darkness and the coming of a new year of enlightenment and moral purity symbolized by the Christ that is to be. This messianic reference underscores the poet's hope for what? Transformative and redemptive future. Hope you'll have understood the lines of this very important poem called Ring Out Wild Bells by Alfred Lord Tennyson. So the whole of the poem is divided into 8 stanzas, with each stanza having 4 lines. So let me come back to the conclusion of this poem, where Ring Out Wild Bells by Alfred Lord Tennyson is a powerful and hopeful poem that calls for the renewal of both individuals and the society. See, the transformation, the new year is nothing but a transformation not only of an individual but a society also, through the metaphor of ringing bells. So he uses comparison. Ringing of bells indicate what? Ringing of bells, according to Tennyson, emphasize the importance of leaving behind the past sorrows. Ring out means remove all the past sorrows, injustices and societal vices, and welcoming what? Ring in means what? Welcoming a new era or a new period characterized by hope, integrity and goodness. The poet has so beautifully conveyed in this poem, like the very word itself, the ring out, ring in. Ring out, ring in the wild bell. See, the very name of the poem itself is so very informative, where the poet wants to convey that ring out means remove all the past sorrows, injustice, societal vices, and welcoming a new era characterized by hope, integrity, and goodness. So the poem's vivid imagery, moral themes, and rhythmic structure make it a poignant meditation on the potential for positive change as time progresses. So how beautifully Alfred Lord Tennyson has conveyed in this poem called Ring Out Wild Bells. That is what he tries to say, that whatever things has happened in the past is past. Move on into the new year with a positive mindset, with new happenings, and with a good will in the coming year. Hope you all have understood this poem called Ring Out Wild Bells by Alfred Lord Tennyson. So this is a wonderful poem by this famous poet called Alfred Lord Tennyson. Thank you.